The formal proceedings start. Beautiful. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional custodians of this land. I'd also like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the Kulin Nation, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians present. I also want to thank Dave for interpreting for us today. I told him I'd try and speak slow, but I'm not very good. So he said if you see smoke coming off his hands, just give me a wave, and I'll try and slow down. Thanks also everyone for coming. Laura told me after I accepted this fantastic role that it was tradition for AAA Play managers to host an event within 3 weeks of starting. So thank you all for helping me to accomplish that today. We're actually here rather early to celebrate International Day of People with Disability, as you all know. Events on this day, as well as events leading up to it and following it, aim to increase public awareness, understanding and acceptance of people with disability and celebrate their achievements and contributions. We're here today to do just that. In a moment, I'll introduce our keynote speaker, Shirley Matheson, as well as our panellists, Fiona Still and Chris Lacey. But first, I'd like to welcome RecLink Australia CEO, John Ballas.
Thank you. Let's start by also acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and certainly I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Shelley, I'm absolutely thrilled to be on the stage with you. I feel humbled and I look forward to hearing your story today. Samantha, thank you for organising this fantastic event at very short notice. You're doing a great job. I want to take the opportunity also thanking the RecLink team for putting this together, so thank you so much for that. And to our interpreter, I will also speak slowly. Thank you. Firstly, to take the opportunity to acknowledge a number of people here. Of course, all of you here who've organised your own schedule for the day to come in so early. Thank you for joining us on this important celebration. And Marnie Gibson, one of our directors, is here today. So Marnie, thank you for organising your time to join us. We are really thrilled to have a member of our board here today. Fiona Still, who's the new manager for NDS, National Disability Services Victoria. It's great to meet you for the first time, but also great for you to be part of our panel. Chris Lacey, our state manager again, stepping up to the mark. Great work, Chris. And I'm sure that the people here today will be interested to hear some of your thoughts in relation to today's events. Rachel Evans, thank you, Rachel, for your support from Sport Rec Victoria, and of course the team from your department here. Thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge our ambassadors, who I don't believe are here today, but our ambassadors are very important to helping us promote the work that we do through AAA Play, Access for All Abilities, and enabling their story to be used as a conduit to helping other people understand that participation in sport and recreation is really a vital part of well-being for everyone, including people with disability. So AAA Play has been now around since 2013. Funded by the Victorian Government. It's a fantastic initiative. It's really quite unusual because of the opportunity to have resources to enable sport and recreation providers use a single platform, a website, AAA Play, in order now to promote 700 unique sport and rec programs across Victoria. Since we commenced in 2013, we have been able to gather support from more than 112,000 users who have accessed a range of activities within Metropolitan and of course now across Victoria. So that's a huge number of people accessing programs. We now have we've reached a number of milestones: 1,200 email subscribers, 2,000 Facebook subscribers, and now more recently more than 5,500 unique on our website in 1 month. So that's a huge achievement. We've also made a number of important changes to the AAA play to make it more accessible. So there is now the option to change the language on the website so that people of different backgrounds can find an opportunity to play sport near them. So the website now has a read, it can be read in Vietnamese, Arabic, Mandarin and Somali. And we have also updated our read speaker function so that every page can be listened to as well as read. All of these initiatives, all of these innovations are to try and make sure that we as a promoter of sport and rec across Victoria can open that up to all cultural groups and of course other people who will gain benefit from the various innovations that we have. So without further ado, maybe I'll put the proceedings back to Sam and the team. So thank you so much.
Thank you, John. I thought I'd just say a few words about International Day of People with Disability. There are more than 1 billion people in the world who live with some form of disability. That equals to about 15% of the world's population. Our ageing and growing population also means this proportion is increasing. Every year we celebrate this vibrant community for International Day of People with Disability. The theme this year is "The Future is Accessible," promoting the participation of persons with disabilities and their leadership, taking action on the 2030 Development Agenda. On this day, we focus on the empowerment of persons with disabilities for inclusive, equitable and sustainable development as anticipated in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This agenda pledges to leave no one behind and recognises disability as a cross-cutting issue to be considered in the implementation of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. International Day of People with Disability is a special time to celebrate the achievements and contributions of this vibrant community, as well as increase public awareness, understanding and acceptance of people with disability. Together we can make sure that we all look towards a future where barriers no longer exist, a future where people can access a building without using stairs and can access a beach using a ramp. This International Day of People with Disability, we are committed to working together to make this future a reality. Since its inception in 1992, thousands of community organisations have held International Day of People with Disability registered events across Australia. Activities are hosted during the week leading up to, on and after the actual day on December 3rd. We are very proud to be a part of this community and work together to create a future that is accessible. So, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our special guest, Shirley Matheson. For almost 17 years, Shirley dedicated her life to being one of the best wheelchair basketballers in the world. Shirley was introduced to wheelchair sports at the age of 12 and made her first senior Australian team when she was just 17. Her first taste of international competition at the World Championships in 2002 was just the beginning, and 2 years later she was one of the youngest players selected for the Athens 2004 Paralympic women's wheelchair basketball team. This team went on to win a silver medal. Not being satisfied with second best, however, Shirley sought out an opportunity to play in the United States College Division and was awarded a full-ride scholarship to the University of Illinois. Throughout her 5 years there, Shirley won 3 national championships, was runner-up twice, and was a national MVP in 2008. After completing her degree in recreation, sport and tourism, Shirley returned to Australia to captain the Australian women's wheelchair basketball team, the Gliders. Throughout her sporting career, Shirley had a number of jobs along the way, including sports coordinator, TV production assistant, travel associate, office administrator, before turning to the corporate world of insurance, where she is pursuing a career as executive assistant. Shirley is also an associate for Get Skilled Access and is passionate about representation in the workforce. Having competed in 5 World Championships and 3 Paralympic Games, Shirley was just 3 games shy of playing 250 games total for Australia when she retired from the sport, with the news that she and her husband Kieran were pregnant with their first child, Ruby, who's in the green room and is the cutest. Also my favourite guest, sorry everybody else. So without anything else, thank you, Shirley.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for having me here today. Thank you for coming. I think it's really great that across Australia and the world, everybody is celebrating me. Well, people with disabilities, sorry, it's not about me too. No, I think it's unreal that everybody celebrates people with disabilities, what they have done, what they do, and what they'll continue to do in the future. And the theme this year is the future is accessible, and I think that's a really cool theme for a few reasons. It gives us something to strive towards. We're not there yet. It's not an accessible world just yet. Sorry, I'm just going to lower this a tiny bit. Sorry. I don't think we're a completely accessible world just yet. Obviously, there's still barriers for people with disabilities. There's physical barriers that we see. There's a lot of access issues. There's not always ramps, accessible bathrooms. There's not always hearing loops or interpreters. Got one today, which is good. But that doesn't happen everywhere. So we've got a long way to go with physical barriers. But I think the more important one is the invisible barriers. So people's attitudes towards people with disability. That's why I get really excited about International Day of People with a Disability, because across the world, people with disabilities are speaking this week. One of my friends referred to International Day of People with Disability as like spring carnival for the disabled. So all week we're in events and doing things. But it's a really cool time of the year where we're not only are our voices heard, we're invited places, we're paid to go places. And for someone with a disability, that doesn't always happen. And so it's really exciting that AAA Play have invested in today. They've made this awesome event, great food, great coffee, all that sort of stuff. But for me, I get to share my story. I get to talk about what it's like to have a disability. And I'm one of the really, really lucky ones. I've represented my country. I've lived overseas. I've lived, I think, a very, very normal life. I just happen to do it from a wheelchair. But not everybody with a disability is that lucky. There are a lot of people that don't get out and about. AAA Play is a place where you can just log on the internet and find a place near you that you'll be welcomed. That is so exciting. It's a huge initiative, and I think it's great for people with disabilities. Sport played such an important role in my life. I would not be on this stage today if I didn't play sport, obviously. But I don't think I would be the person I am today if I didn't play sport. It really helped to define me and to give me a place to have confidence and to belong. And for that, I'm always grateful for sport. I grew up in country Victoria, and I'm the second of 3 kids. And I wasn't immediately obvious that I had a disability when I was born, but 6 months after I was born, I was sitting up, and my parents noticed that I couldn't sit up anymore. I was like falling over, like didn't have any balance. And when the doctors found that I had a tumour on my spine that needed to be removed. And when it was removed, part of my spinal cord was damaged. So today I'm an incomplete paraplegic. I can stand, which is very handy. I can move my legs a little bit, I have some sensation, but none of it's normal, and it all results in I use a wheelchair. Pretty boring stuff. I do share that because people want to know, and I understand curiosity, but just know you don't need to know that. It's boring. It's not the most interesting thing I'll talk about today. And often people's disabilities are not them. So I would encourage you, if you meet someone with a disability, find out their name before you find out what happened to them. The amount of times that I have been approached and say, hey, what happened to you? Oh, hi, I'm Shirley. Nice to meet you. I think it's really important that we don't define people by their disability. And you guys all know that. I'm sure people in this room already know that. It's just a really important thing to remember. So as I said, I grew up in country Victoria, and my parents had never known anybody with a disability. So when they had a kid with a disability, they didn't know what to do. I think that when parents have children with disabilities, there's a natural tendency to try and protect them from the world a little bit. The world can be a very, very cool place if you're different. And if you have a disability, you're very different. Not today, but usually you're the only one in the room in a wheelchair. I've got Duke today. Usually you're the only one in the room. And being in country Victoria, I was absolutely the only one with a disability. So parents sometimes try to protect their kids from that. Roll them up in cotton wool, maybe hold them back from competing in sports or from doing certain activities for fear they'll get hurt, either physically or emotionally. My parents did not do that. They love me very much, but they did not wrap me up in cotton wool. Not once did I get to play the disabled card when I was a kid. They're like, oh, I can't do the dishes because I'm in a wheelchair. That stuff did not fly. My parents brought me up exactly the same as my brother and sister. My parents very much had an attitude of, you'll be right, get on with it. Sometimes almost, well, absolutely to my detriment. One time I was with my sister and we were jumping from the top bunk to the bottom bunk and onto the floor. It was after lights out, but you know, sometimes you're naughty when you're a kid. And on the very last jump, I broke my leg. Mum hates this story, by the way. I broke my leg, and as a kid I didn't walk very well, but I could walk, and I couldn't walk on the broken leg, obviously. Mum sent me to bed. You'll be right, Shal. The next morning, I got sent to a birthday party with a broken leg. You'll be right. By the end of the birthday party, my friend's mum said, I think you need to take her to the hospital. She hasn't walked on that leg all day. And Mum hates that story, but I think it just shows the strength of my family to, maybe a little bit to the extreme, but they never wrapped me up in cotton wool. They didn't try and protect me from the world at all. They sort of let me make of it what I will. And obviously I wasn't in that much pain or I wouldn't have gone to the party, so I think Mum was okay there. It wasn't the only time that I broke my leg and no one believed me too, by the way. Anyway, I think it was really the way my parents brought me up was really, really character defining and helped me to be who I am today. I don't think all kids are that lucky. And so sometimes it's harder for kids to get out there because their parents are trying to protect them a little bit too much. I got involved in wheelchair sports when I was 12, and before that I didn't even know they existed. So I'm trying to play with the able-bodied kids. As I mentioned, not very good at walking, not very good at not falling over. So trying to compete with the able-bodied kids was awful. But back then there was nowhere for me to find out about wheelchair sports. I was really lucky that the Paralympians were coming home from the Atlanta Games and there was a ticker tape parade in Melbourne, and somebody had said to me, you should go along. And I happened to be in a wheelchair that day because it was a long way to walk and someone said jump in a chair. Otherwise I would never have known that wheelchair sports even existed because it didn't in country Victoria at that time. So someone saw me and they said, you should get involved in wheelchair sports, and I went, great, don't know what that is, but okay. I went to a come and try day where I tried every single sport, was terrible at all of them, absolutely all of them, especially basketball, but I loved it. And the thing about wheelchair basketball is, well, I think it's the best sport in the world, a little bit biased, but I think it's the best sport in the world because once you all sit down in a wheelchair, everybody is on a level playing field. Nobody has an advantage over anybody else, we're all the same. And that was particularly good when my brother got in a chair and I was a little bit better. But yeah, I absolutely loved basketball. There was no opportunity for me to play at home, and so I had to travel to Melbourne, an hour and a half each way. And my mum kept doing it, driving me back and forth. At first it was once a week, but as I got a little bit better, it would be 2, 3, 4 times a week by the time I was in year 12. And part of it, I think she was a bit of a lazy parent and she wanted to have something over me all the time. Because I love basketball so much, I'd be like, do what you're told or you're not going to basketball. It was a pretty good draw card. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. I wasn't very good at it. But what basketball gave me was a place to belong. And that is so important, especially when you're, starting high school and you don't know what your life is going to be. Everybody wants to be the same as everyone else, and you're the one person that sticks out more than anything. At wheelchair basketball, I didn't stick out. No one cared that I was in a wheelchair. No one thought anything of that. It was also the first time I had seen people with disabilities leading regular lives. I didn't even know then that people with disabilities in wheelchairs drove cars or had babies or had got married or played sport at an elite level. I'm really lucky to be able to say that I've done all of that now, but I don't know that I would have if I hadn't seen it. I was really, really, really lucky to be involved in wheelchair sports. I was lucky I happened to go on that day. I was lucky that someone told me about it. So I played basketball. I played a lot of basketball. I got better at basketball. I did say I was terrible at the start. I was really terrible. I couldn't shoot, couldn't pass, couldn't catch. All pretty important in basketball. But by the time I got to year 12, I was better at these things. Not the best, definitely not the best, but I was better at these things. I got invited to my first Australian camp and I absolutely loved it. I'm so competitive. I'm the most competitive person going around. So I loved that about it. I love being physically active. It's so important for people with disabilities and really hard sometimes when you're in a wheelchair. You can't just chuck on some runners and get out on the streets. So basketball was really important in so many ways. I went to my first World Championships when I was in year 12, and that's when I saw that people were doing this for a profession, or this was what their lives were. They're dedicating it towards this. I was like, absolutely, I want to do this. I made my first Paralympic team in 2004 at the Athens Paralympic Games. Our very first game was against the US, and US in sport, it's a tough matchup always. They were the best team in the world at the time. I was the worst player on the Australian team, so I didn't care about any of that. I was like, oh, I'm just going to sit on the bench anyway and have a good time. Free McDonald's in the village, or what more do you want? I didn't play a lot of minutes, but we managed to beat the US in the opening game of the Paralympics, and it's pretty obvious, but there's only one thing better than beating the Americans. It's like beating them by 1 point. And that's what we did at the Athens Paralympics and that first game. We beat them by 1 point. Thrilled, set us up for the whole competition. We actually managed from there to go on and play for a gold medal against the Americans again. And I was at my first Paralympic Games, my eyes are like huge. I didn't even know what being a Paralympian meant until I was in the village and there. And it is amazing. You spend the whole 10 days surrounded by incredible athletes who happen to have disabilities. They're so good at what they do, and it's so inspiring to be there. And it's amazing just to watch people do everyday things. And like, I would see somebody who had no arms eat their dinner with chopsticks, rice. That's incredible. And I'm amazed, and then I think, I shouldn't be amazed. They're just eating. And then it makes me reflect on when people see me in the street pushing my pram and they go, you're amazing. I'm like, no, I'm just getting my baby from A to B. But it's perspective, right? When you see someone doing something that you can't imagine yourself doing, it's so easy to get caught up and be amazed. But I ask you all to just take a step back and have a think and think, hey, how many times has this person done this? And then that's when you have a better idea of whether or not what they're doing is amazing. I encourage you all to think that it's amazing what I do in basketball, by the way, just not what I do in my everyday life. Anyway, so at the Athens Paralympics, we got to the gold medal game. We're playing the US. I'm like, yes, we're in. I don't need to worry about anything because I'm getting a medal. No matter what colour, I'm getting a medal tomorrow, wrapped. So excited. And during the game, we were losing by a lot of points, which is pretty upsetting, but I wasn't really worried because I'm just a bench player. I get to cheer a bit, but whatever. And one of the star players wasn't playing very well, and so my coach would be like, Shirley, sub in. I'm like, yes, I'm getting in. I go up there and she would do one good thing. Like, she might catch the ball or she might get 2 points. He'd be like, Shirley, cancel the sub. This happened to me 6 times. It was awful, absolutely awful. And it got down to the last 2 minutes of the game, and we were down by a lot. I think we were down by maybe 18 points. Like, we were never winning the gold medal. And I was like, okay, well, this is done now. I don't need to worry about it. And my coach puts me back in the game. Oh, awful. And I got really caught up in the emotion of it. Caught me by surprise. I didn't know how much I wanted a gold medal at that point. But I was devastated. I was crying on court. I was so upset. The thing about a silver medal is you don't win it. You lose your gold medal. And that's what we'd gone for. We'd gone for a gold medal and didn't get it. So instead we have this other one that's this different colour. But I got it here. So this is my silver medal from Athens. At the time, not happy about this. I'm pretty happy now. So when you play the gold medal game and you lose it, you go straight into the medal ceremony afterwards. So you've got people on one side who have just won a gold medal and they're ecstatic. And then you've got the bronze people on the other side, who are thrilled to have a medal at all, and you're in the middle with this, and you're like, oh, thanks. And you don't want to be a brat, but you kind of feel like you want to be. I'll pass this around later, or you guys come and have a look at it later. You'll notice there's a little dint in the side. So I was pretty upset about this colour. And afterwards, there's some parties, the Mexicans had tequila, whatever. And I actually got so upset I threw my medal on the ground because I don't want this one. And yeah, there's a dint in there to remind me of how passionate I was about the colour of this medal. So I knew I had to do something to change it. And I thought, well, I'm the weakest player on this team. And if I want the team to get better, maybe I should get better. Makes sense, right? And what I decided to do was take up an opportunity to study and to play basketball at the University of Illinois. The University of Illinois is world renowned as being the best wheelchair basketball program, world renowned in the world, sorry. And people came from all over the world to play on this team. We had people from Japan, we had them from Finland, from Germany, from Canada, everywhere to play wheelchair basketball. It was so good. And not only are we playing wheelchair basketball, we're getting our education paid for. So important, so lucky. I do not think this would have happened for me if I hadn't had a disability. I can only ever say that it was a positive for me that I had a disability, because these doors wouldn't have been open for me. My brother and sister didn't leave the country town that they grew up in. Nothing wrong with that. But I wanted to explore the world, and I was only able to because of these opportunities through sport. So I took up this opportunity, and you get a degree. It's paid for by the sporting program. It's big business sport in America. But there is this little clause that if you don't complete your degree, you have to pay $80,000 every year for every year that you don't complete. And so when I went and told my parents, they were rapt for me. But my dad was so angry that he punched the fridge and broke 3 bones in his hand. Not because I was going to the other side of the world and he was worried about me, because he might have to pay this money if I didn't complete my degree. I did complete my degree, he was fine. And felt very silly about the whole fridge thing. Yeah, I was so lucky to be able to take up this opportunity. When I got to Illinois, it was the first time that I was amongst my peers and they had disabilities. And they were exactly the same as every other student on campus. But there was a huge basketball program. There's about 30 of us. There was about 20 track and field athletes in the disabled program over there as well. So that's a big population of people with disabilities all in the one place, and they're all 18 to 20. I felt at home, sort of, which sounds silly because it's so far away from my actual home, but it was a place where I belonged, and I was exactly the same as everybody else. And American university is exactly what you see in the movies. All the fraternities, the colleges, all that sort of, the red cups, all the drinking games, all happens. But I was a student athlete, so I didn't get involved in any of that, obviously. I was a student first and athlete second. That's what they always wanted us to say, but I really love the basketball the most. So I got a degree in recreation, sport and tourism, but I also got a degree in wheelchair basketball, which is something that I absolutely cherish. And it meant that I went from being the weakest person on the Athens team to being one of the strongest players on our Australian team at the 2008 Paralympic Games. So as I said before, I get better, the whole team gets better, change the colour of my medal, right? Got another one in here to show you. So the 2008 Paralympics was very good. They filled stadiums in Beijing. It was such a fun tournament to play in. I was playing against some of my teammates from Illinois, where I was playing against on the world stage, which was a very strange feeling. But I knew all of the things that they, all their nuances in basketball, so I thought, yeah, I got their measure. We played the US in the semi-final, so the winner goes to the gold medal game, and the loser goes to the bronze medal game. We actually lost that game. It was devastating. We trained for 4 years for a gold medal, not for bronze, not for fourth, not for anything other than gold. And to not even make it that far was very, very devastating. And it made me reflect on my Athens devastation and be like, well, I was being a bit of a brat then, wasn't I? Because now I don't even get to play for the gold medal. And I remember my coach saying to me, pain is temporary, but pride lasts forever. And we were told if we don't go and win that bronze medal, it's going to feel a lot worse than not even getting to play for the gold. Because we were so devastated. We didn't even want to play for the bronze. But the Japanese did. And they obviously wanted that medal really badly. They weren't even expected to medal. And while we were expected to win gold, we were being very probably brats again, but we didn't want to play for the bronze medal. But pain is temporary, pride lasts forever, and I am very proud of our bronze medal from the 2008. See, they get a little bit bigger as we go along. This is a beautiful medal. I'm very proud of it because we didn't want it. But in the end, we had to play for that medal, and we had to alter our goal in the middle of a tournament. Overnight, we had to go from devastation for not playing for gold to then having to rally and win a bronze medal. So I'm very proud of that one. After the 2008 Paralympics, I went back and finished my degree in Illinois. I was then offered a position doing basketball programming in Vancouver, so I got to do that as well. Again, I would never have lived overseas if I hadn't have, had a disability and played sport. It opened so many doors for me. I absolutely loved my time in Vancouver. I think I almost wanted to become Canadian. I was so excited to be there. But I was convinced that I probably should come back to Australia. To get this first silver medal, I had to improve myself to change it to a different colour. And then I thought, if I work really hard with my team in Australia, then maybe I'll get that elusive gold, complete the set, I'm done with basketball. So I came back to Australia for to train for the London 2012 Games. The London Games was the best experience of my life, hands down. And I said we played in front of packed stadiums in 2008. In 2012, we played in front of packed stadiums where they knew what sport was. It was really, really cool. So in wheelchair basketball, there's this really, it's a little bit of a trick, it might be a little bit dirty, but if someone gets up on your wheel, if you flick your own wheel in a special way, you can make them fall over. They go on the ground, you get an advantage. I'm very good at it, I'm very good at getting away with it and the ref's not seen. But in Beijing, if someone fell out of their wheelchair, the crowd would be, oh, no. And then when they got up, cheered. Whereas in London, the best part about the games is someone's on the ground, the crowd was so excited. They knew that we had an advantage and they were behind us. It was so cool. Also, it really helped that Great Britain had a terrible wheelchair basketball team at the time, and so they all just jumped on board with Australia and wanted to go for us. So it was really, really cool. It's so fun because so many of my friends from Illinois were there. So many of my mates came over from Australia. Like, it was really fun to play at the 2012 Games. Got one more thing in here. So we did make it to the gold medal game, and we weren't the best team in the world at that point. I don't think we were even the second best team in the world at that point, but we played together so well. We were really, really strong at defense because we were a great team. We were so closely knit, and I'll just tell you, we didn't win gold. It was devastating. It was absolutely devastating, but I got a really big medal. It's crazy the size of the ground. It wasn't quite as devastating as my other silver. Although we did lose the gold medal, this medal to me means a lot because we worked really hard. We worked well as a team, and I think for this one it just shows all this. It's a symbol of how much we put into that journey. I think that I was a little bit naive for my first couple of Paralympics, thinking that a medal was a given. And in London, I didn't think a medal was a given. And so I feel very lucky to have been able to play for a medal and to be able to have that one here to show you today. It's easy to say this now because when we were trying to make the Rio Paralympic team, the way it works is that there was only one spot for in our zone for the Paralympic Games in Rio. So there's 3 powerhouses in our zone: China, Japan and Australia. And there's only one position for Rio. But we were going to win it anyway. We knew that. We went off to the qualifying tournament, and we only really had to win one game at that tournament. And that one game, we actually lost. So it's easy for me to be proud of these medals now because not qualifying hurts way more than losing a gold medal. My whole life changed, and I think the biggest change was that I was no longer a Paralympian, and so much of what I've told you today is about sport and how it defined me and how it helped me to be who I am today, and that was all taken away. So then I was just disabled, and it's hard when you have a disability and you represent your country and you play sport and you get all these opportunities. And as I said to you, I can't think of it as a negative because I'm doing so much cool stuff. That when I then came home, didn't have a Paralympics to train for, 3 years I trained for the Paralympic Games in Rio and then it got taken away. I was just disabled and it kind of sucked. Like when you don't have the Paralympics to train for, you notice all the things about being disabled that kind of suck. Like trying to get parking when there's no disabled parks available, or trying to get into a building that doesn't have ramp access, or going to a friend's place and they live up 3 flights of stairs. Those things really suck for people with disabilities. And I think what's worse is that once we weren't training for Rio anymore, I didn't have my community around me. I didn't have all my teammates to show me that it was okay, that I didn't have someone that I was doing it with. That's why I think it's so important for people to get involved in sport, because you meet people like you that are going through the same experiences. I think it's important for people with disabilities to connect with other people so we can share that, oh, this is a bit shit. So that you can go and have a bit of a bad moment, but then you can sort of rally and keep going. I think that the future is accessible, and people are starting to understand that people with disabilities don't need much to make our lives a whole lot easier. I know that for me, I don't need a ramp more than I need someone to say, hey, it's okay, there's a ramp. Does that make sense to everybody? You don't need the ramp if you've got somebody to pull you up one step. It's about the people around you being able to help you. And I think that that's why it's so important to not only consider physical barriers for people with disabilities, it's more about the invisible barriers. So people without disabilities can support people with disabilities, because disability does not discriminate. Anybody can become disabled at any point, any time. It can happen to anybody. And you know yourself that you're not going to change significantly. You don't want to change your entire life just because you're disabled or anything like that. So it's important for us to support people that do have disabilities. 1 in 5 Australians live with disability. That's a lot. It's a lot of people. And I think that it's really important that we accommodate for these people. I think universal design is when things are just easily accessible to everybody. And that's the way we're heading. We're building new buildings that are accessible to everybody, but it's the attitudes that really need to work on. It's cool that you guys are all here today and that you can see that people with disabilities like myself are just trying to live our lives and get out there in the world. And I think for me, being surrounded by people that help me take away those physical barriers means that I don't have to deal with as many of the invisible barriers. I'm so excited for International Day of People with Disability. I thank you so much for inviting me here today to speak. I love sharing my story because I think it's been a really great journey. I would not change what I have. I wouldn't walk for quids. I think it's overrated. Thank you.
Wow, I don't know how I can follow that. I need to say I'm incredibly inspired to continue working to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to play sport. I'm sure everyone in the room is as well. That was incredible. Thank you, Shirley. Now I'd like to invite our panellists onto the stage. We've got Chris Lacey, my boss at RecLink and AAA Play. He's been working with RecLink for 5 years and is doing an incredible job making AAA Play what it is today. So thank you, Chris. We've also got Fiona Still, who was previously the NDIS Sector Transition Manager, managing the sector engagement team, and in July this year was appointed as the Victorian State Manager of the NDS. So I thought I'd start with you, Shirley, just in response to your speech. I think the future is accessible, I agree. Do you think it is getting easier for people with disabilities to access sporting opportunities and participate in sport at all levels?
Absolutely. I really do. I think that more and more mainstream clubs are inviting people with disabilities into their clubs. Chris and I were talking about it earlier, but there's advocates everywhere that are able-bodied, but maybe they have some experience with disability and they're inviting people into their clubs, but encouraging the clubs to make room for people with disabilities. I think that's so exciting.
Fiona, you're relatively new to the role of State Manager of the NDS, but you've been working in the sector for over 30 years, I understand. Over that time, what have you learned about what is required from all of us to ensure a future that is accessible?
I wrote some notes and they're all things Shirley said, so that's great. I'm on the right track, obviously. But it is that, when we think about accessibility, we've gone to the physical access, and it's really important that there is physical access. If you can't get up the flight of stairs, then you can't participate. And we're getting better at that. We need to ensure that there are less exceptions given. That it's not something that can be compromised on. Access needs to be there. But the really big piece of work comes around that culture change. That it's not that we're we must remember to be inclusive, that it just becomes the norm, and that's where we need to get to. And universal design helps, and it's really important, and it's important for everyone. We're an ageing society. You know, if we're designing universal designs, we're helping people who might have, you know, mobility problems as they age. We're helping parents in prams, whether they are in wheelchairs or they're not in wheelchairs. We're just helping build an environment that's inclusive of everybody. And I suppose one of the things I want to do, I'm a storyteller, so I tell stories to sort of illustrate that. This year at the Victorian Disability Awards, a young woman who participates in both AFL and, I was going to say football, I call AFL football, but soccer and AFL, and she has autism, and she was given an award for young leadership. And she spoke about how important sport was for her with autism. That she had difficulty connecting, you know, she wanted to be around people and connect to people, but she had difficulty with the communication, doing those things, and she loved sport. And the thing she loved sport, and this is where she saw real value for people with disabilities, is that it has rules. And those rules can be rewritten and changed and be adapted, but there's rules, they're predictable, and for her that was really important. But the other thing about sport for her was it had its own language, that she could connect to her teammates and she knew that language and she knew the right things to say. Pass on the left, pass on the right, you know, and she could participate in that, where some of the other social interactions she felt really uncomfortable with, it was difficult for her, but here she belonged to a team, and she knew the language and she knew where that. And for her, the world just became a little bit more accessible, and she didn't need to ensure that there was a ramp and stuff, but before it had been difficult for her to connect. I think that's really important. The other story is about, you know, more general. The NDIS, when it rolled out, has this, that Australia is open for business for all Australians. That's what it's built on. And about 3 years into trial, someone I knew went to visit a friend in Barwon, where the trial started, and they said, oh my God, you've got so many more people with disabilities living here in Barwon than we've got in Melbourne. And they said, no, we've just got the NDIS. They've got the ability to get out, you know, that if they need a support worker, it's funded. They're trying new things, they're doing that capacity has been lifted because there's been an investment in supporting their independence, to really exploring economic and social recreational opportunities. So that's a really important thing that we have acknowledged as a country, that we need to invest in accessibility.
Beautiful, thanks, Fiona. Chris, you've also been working in the sector for a number of years. Why do you think AAA play is so important in this space?
First of all, thanks, Shirley, for sharing your story. It was fantastic, and this is, I think, the 4th or 5th one of these, and I'm always come away from this event really inspired, because you get to hear stories of people's lived experience, and that's, again, you're a storyteller, and I think we at RecLink and a AAA player as well, which is really important. Look, I think the journey that state sporting associations and sports have been on over the last 4 or 5 years has been a really exciting one, and it's you know, and I'm going to give credit to Sport and Rec Victoria, I think, because a lot of the work that's been done in that space has been encouraged or cajoled, whatever word you want to use, by SRV through the funding levers that they have and through the work plans, and assisting the sports to think outside the box from what they've been doing for sometimes over 100 years, to actually say, hey, it doesn't always have to be exactly the same. We can do things differently and we can create more opportunities, and that's been a big shift. And I think when I started with AAA playing with RecLink, there was still a bit of convincing that was going on at that point, but I don't think there's any convincing happening anymore. I think all the sports are aligned with that vision and are all moving in that one direction, which is fantastic. And AAA Play's role is to tell the community and let everyone know about the great work that's been done in sports and the opportunities that are available. And having one portal, because every sport, or most of the sports, have got their own websites, got their own ways of telling people about what they're doing, but sometimes those activities are 5, 6, 7, 8 clicks into a website. They're harder to find. With AAA Play, it's that immediate access to the information. Putting in your postcode immediately comes up with a list of activities that are close to where you live, and leisure centres as well. And that's the important part of what AAA Play does. It just gives everyone that opportunity to find what's available. And Shirley, you talked about in your story about that turning point for you was when you actually found out that there was sports available, wheelchair sports actually existed. And what's really exciting is that that's now less the question. Now the question is, why isn't that sport that's available there, why isn't that not available in my area? I'd like to do that. And so the conversation, the expectations of community is shifting. And my real hope is that at some point in the future, AAA play doesn't need to exist, because every sporting club is accessible, you know, and in terms of the future is accessible. That's my hope for the future, is that rather than us having to list the activities that are accessible, everyone knows they can go to their local sporting club, whatever sport that might be, and be able to participate to their fullest ability without it having to be a special program.
Shirley, we all know there's barriers to sport participation for everyone, in particular women. What's your advice to all of us to empower people with disabilities to be involved in sport in the future?
I would say to people with disabilities, or women in general, just try everything until you find your place, because although I took it to the extreme and played the Paralympic sport, you don't have to. You can just go down and be terrible at tennis, but you're socialising, and I've done that. That's why I say it. But yeah, I think just find a place where you can have fun, be active, and meet other people. I think it's really important, and yeah, I think that AAA play have created that opportunity for people with disabilities. But it's the same for anyone, whether you have a disability or not. It's so important to get involved in things, and yeah, just try everything until you find one that sticks.
Fiona, you said in your article, Fiona's Focus, which I know we're all avid readers of, that in the future there is a need for the sector to be resilient as it keeps pace with the great changes, while also being responsive to meet changing demands. What did you mean by this, and how do we go about it?
I'm just going to let Shirley know, because I'm sure she's interested. As an overweight 40-year-old, I took up golf because I'm uncoordinated. It's technically difficult, but I've got some new friends, and I got a birdie. Only one, mind you, but I have got it.
You got it.
Yeah, exactly. Achievement's always great. Yeah, it was a great quote for you to find, Sam, and a great question. One of the things about the last 6 years is that the sector has been on a wild ride, and it's with the introduction of the NDIS, and the NDIS is something that was fought long and hard for by people with disability, by service providers, by carers, but it has brought so much to our sector, and it's amazing. But it's not without its challenges. And so in writing that article, I was really looking at how organisations need to be really on the front foot with the people that they support and the staff that provide services to help guide them through that change, because as an example, the NDIS releases a yearly price guide, and it comes out in July usually, and it comes out with different prices for things, but it also comes out with policy changes. So the rules, the playing ground, they change a little. It came out just before the end of the financial year. 3 days later, there was some, because of the big outrage, there was some more changes that came to it. They've had another major change on the 1st of October, and there's been another change in December. So the rules keep changing. In sport, as I said, rules are good, we can structure them, but that's really difficult. But that also has to come in the background. We as organisations have to make sure that we've got our eye on the prize and really look at how we adapt with those things that are changing. And business has fundamentally changed for disability service organisations. So the people who just thought, the money's coming from somewhere different, are really struggling. So the people who went, this is new, this is different, we're really looking at a world where people with disabilities are not slotted into what's on offer. They've got choice and control. Everybody's an individual. Everybody's goals are individual. So the way the service system has to respond to that is very different. And so, I was really talking about how people need to be on the front foot with that. I'm not a glass half empty person, but I'm also not a glass half full. I'm a glass full person. It's half full of water, it's half full of air, let's go and grab it. But you really have to actually work to make sure that everyone else comes along with it as well.
The glass is full of something.
Yeah.
Just touching on that, Chris, we're all having to work together. You've mentioned the work that AAA Play does. How do you think we can work everyone together in this room and in the greater sports sector to make sure that the future is accessible?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think, keep talking, keep engaging, keep learning from each other. community development principal, and I'm a community development guy, acknowledges that there's strengths already there in the community. There's amazing things happening in accessibility already. It might be hidden below the surface. Shirley mentioned the conversation we had before, which is about, in clubs, it's often our experience is that there's generally an advocate within a club that works really hard at creating opportunities. And the challenge becomes when that advocate, because it's a volunteer role, they move on, their child grows up, they're no longer part of the club. And sometimes you're taking 5 steps forward and then sometimes there's 3 steps back. So I think those are the things, like when we make advances, when clubs are doing great things, we need to provide support right across the board to those things that are happening on the ground, those things that are happening naturally. Like I was sharing about our football club in West Footscray, doesn't have our AFL club, doesn't have a AAA Auskick program officially, but there are a number of parents who run an Auskick along the side for kids that are on the spectrum, and they take part at the start and at the end with everyone when they play the game, which is what the kids all really want to do. But the mums and dads that are there create a little space for those kids a bit further away. It's a bit away from the main group, which is just brilliant, and it just happened naturally, and the club just supported that to happen. And now other families are hearing about that. It's bringing more families to that club. It's bringing other players, other people, into the environment, which is just fantastic. And now my job on the committee of that club is to make sure we continue to do that into the future, and whatever that might be. So working together, learning from each other, acknowledging the great things and the strengths that are already within the community, and doing whatever we can to foster that, and I think is what's really important. And just agreeing that the future is accessible, and saying, rather than being a conversation or a question, just saying, well, that's what it's going to be, and that's what we need to do everything we can to enable that to happen, and be moving in the one direction together.
Beautiful. Just to finish, Fiona, hopefully on a positive note as well, can you tell us about some of the key trends and major shifts you've noticed over your time in the disability sector and how this may impact on the future?
The biggest thing in this 30 years is the NDIS, and I think that's it fundamentally has flipped disability services really very taken from, so 30 years ago when I started work, and I worked in disability from the start of my career, but it was still very much steeped in a medical model of disability. NDS funds on more of a social model, and the premise that people with disability should lead an ordinary life, and that's not an ordinary life. Like Shelley's had a few extraordinary things happen in her life, but it's an ordinary life. She drives a car, has a kid, works, all those things. That's what everyone should be striving for, and so that fundamental change is huge. And there's 3 tiers to that NDIS. One is that Australia is accessible and welcoming and is a place where everyone has a home, if you like, and that includes people with disability. The 3rd tier of it is the individual supports that someone might need because of their disability. What are the things that are specific to their disability that they might need assistance with? So it might be personal care, it might be building skills and capacity, and it's an insurance scheme. So it really looks at, can we make investment early in people's lives so that they can achieve more and perhaps need less specific supports. The middle tier, I think, is the one that's still got the biggest development to do in the NDIS, which is around that community mainstream. So talking the things that Chris has talked about, but really looking at how the community activities can be inclusive of all people. And I think that, there's lots of things happening out there. And again, I just illustrate it with a story, and this is where we're changing. So in the NDIS, there are roles called support coordination, where people actually help people with their packages to look at how they can connect to mainstream community services and to the funded supports that they need. And I was doing a training course with people about 18 months ago, and someone said, what if someone comes in, they've got unrealistic goals? And I said, well, give me an example, what do you mean? And she said, they want to play football with Dusty Martin, and I apologise, Mark, because you've heard this story, and it's unrealistic. And I said, well, let's unpack it. It's not. Let's look at what's behind that. Do they have a passion for AFL football? Do they want to play at a local club level? Do they want to meet Dusty Martin? Is there particularly, it might be a sport or it might be an economic opportunity for them within the Richmond Football Club. You know, there are whole ways to look at that goal and unpack it and how that works for that person. Or as I said to Mark, and I said to this woman who was quite shocked, I said, or is it just that they want tats up their arms? You know, like really unpack and find out what it is for that person, that what that goal means to him. Yeah. You can pay a lot of money to get your hair cut like that.
Exactly.
But it really is about being looking at possibilities and looking at what things are at and what that means for that person, because it's different from all of us. You know, I will never get off the maximum handicap at golf, but I've had that birdie, you know. You know, so it really looks at that we're all individual, and you know, but also, you know, and I don't have a disability, but I never would be an elite sports person. I love sport and played it as a kid because I was in the country, because you just had to. But I was there for the team. You know, I was there because I was connecting to people, was the social aspect. And there are other people that, you know, need to connect to support because they want to win that gold. They want to win that bronze because, you know, we might not go into the gold medal playoff, but we're still coming home with something. You know, and we're all different. And I think that's what, in our sector, that we won't need a special sector for it. It will just be that accessibility is when there are just that reasonable adjustment. Oh yeah, come in and try and let's see what we do. Let's be curious about what we can do to adapt and make sure that our club works for you.
Beautiful. I just want to thank the panellists so much for their that sort of wraps up most of the formal activities. I just have a few things I'd like to thank Shirley again for her amazing speech. Thank you so much. And I got one for Chris, and hopefully you share that.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Dave as well. I hope there's no smoke yet. All good. Also, thanks to Seth, my colleague, who's been doing the Facebook Live and helped me with this event. Basically, everything that you see is because of her. And thank you also to John and Chris and everyone at RecLink for their support in this event and with AAA more broadly. It's been a really great team to come into, and I'm really, really excited to take on the role. Laura will be back next year, but I'm really looking forward to getting my teeth into it until then. And I hope, if I haven't met you already, hopefully meet you afterwards or in the future. But help yourself to treats. We've got the room until 9:45ish, so also I'm aware of the trams, so if you need to get onto public transport, feel free to leave. But thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.